A top-secret file vanishes from a ghost server, triggering an analog alarm unseen for decades. The world's most secure network wasn't breached by a hacker, but by a ghost who everyone thought was just the cleaning lady. To the soldiers at Fort Jackson, she was just Lena, a woman in her early 30s who had somehow perfected the art of being invisible. She existed in the background, a ghost in plain sight, clad in baggy gray coveralls that hid any hint of her form. Her light brown hair was always pulled back into a messy, functional bun, and a pair of cheap, black-framed glasses constantly slid down her nose, a prop designed to make people look away. She was the one who mopped the muddy boot prints from the barracks floor, who emptied the trash cans overflowing with energy drink cans, and who quietly cleaned the latrines long after everyone else had gone home. Her presence was so peripheral that she became a piece of the building itself, unremarkable and easily ignored. The young recruits, buzzing with testosterone and the thrill of their new lives, would brush past her without a word, their minds on drills and weekend passes. "Hey, watch it," a young private might grunt, not even bothering to look as he jostled her aside. The junior officers were worse. They saw her as a function, not a person. "Lena, my office smells like stale coffee." "Fix it," a sharp-faced lieutenant would command, pointing a pen without making eye contact, his tone laced with the casual arrogance of newfound authority. Lena would just offer a quiet, almost apologetic nod, her eyes downcast, and shuffle off to perform the task. She never complained. She barely spoke. She just worked, her movements deliberate and slow, reinforcing the image of someone utterly ordinary. But her work was a silent language, a form of active surveillance that went completely unnoticed. When she cleaned an M4 carbine in the armory, she wasn't just wiping away grime. Her fingers, which appeared clumsy and chapped, would glide over the weapon's surfaces with the sensitivity of a surgeon. She could feel the almost imperceptible stress fracture in a bolt carrier group that a standard inspection would miss, the subtle warping in a barrel that would throw around a hair's breadth off target at 400 yards. Her slow, shuffling gait wasn't a sign of fatigue. It was a study in energy conservation, a way to move through a space while observing everything and revealing nothing. She watched them on the firing range, her gaze not empty, but intensely analytical. She wasn't daydreaming. She was cataloging. She saw the recruit whose stance was too narrow, compromising his balance. She noted the one who had a microscopic flinch, a premature tightening of the shoulder muscles a fraction of a second before pulling the trigger. She was a walking, breathing database of human error, hidden behind a mask of weary indifference. She was the quietest person on the base, and by far the most dangerous. Sergeant Major Reyes was a man forged from 3 decades of service, his face a roadmap of deployments and disappointments. He had seen it all, and his eyes had a way of cutting through pretense. Visiting Fort Jackson to oversee a new training cycle, he missed nothing. As he watched a platoon struggle through a marksmanship drill, his gaze drifted from the recruits to the shouting instructors, and finally settled on the quiet woman sweeping up spent brass casings near the firing line. He watched Lena bend down to pick up a dropped cleaning patch. It wasn't the stiff, awkward bend of an untrained civilian. It was a fluid, perfectly balanced motion, a textbook tactical crouch that kept her center of gravity low and her body coiled like a spring. Reyes's eyebrow twitched. That was precise. A moment later, a nervous recruit fumbled his magazine change, dropping the fresh mag into the dirt. A drill instructor immediately got in the kid's face, his voice a torrent of creative insults. From 30 yards away, Reyes saw the cleaning lady mutter something under her breath, so quiet it was almost stolen by the wind. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. It was a common mantra in the special operations community, but the cadence, the specific, rhythmic whisper, felt ancient. It was an echo from forgotten war. Reyes's head snapped toward Lena. He looked closer, his expert eyes scanning for details, and then he saw it. On her left wrist, partially hidden by the cuff of her coveralls, was a simple, dark-colored woven cord bracelet. The knot that secured it was no ordinary knot. It was a complex, interlocking series of loops, a specific variant of a marlinspike hitch used as an identification marker by a unit that officially had been wiped from existence 20 years ago. Reyes felt a cold knot of dread form in his stomach, mixed with a shocking, profound sense of awe. He wasn't just looking at a janitor. He was looking at a ghost. That evening, the armory was silent except for the rhythmic metallic slide of a cleaning rod down a rifle barrel. Sergeant Major Reyes entered without a sound, his combat boots gliding over the polished concrete. Lena didn't look up. She sat on a low wooden stool under the harsh fluorescent lights, meticulously wiping down an M4 receiver, the very picture of mundane diligence. Reyes stood in the doorway for a long, heavy moment, the silence stretching between them like a high-tension wire. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and tight, meant only for her. "That knot on your bracelet, and the phrase you used on the range. I've only seen one unit use that specific hitch. I was told they were all gone." Lena didn't stop her work. Her hands continued their slow, methodical polishing. But for a single, infinitesimal fraction of a second, they paused. It was a skipped heartbeat in the rhythm of her movements, a glitch in the placid facade. Then, she resumed. But everything had changed. The motion was no longer the careful work of a cleaner. Her hands became a blur of impossible, practiced efficiency. The bolt carrier group, the trigger assembly, the charging handle. She disassembled the core components of the rifle by touch alone, her eyes finally lifting from her work to lock onto his. The meek, downcast gaze was gone. In its place was an intensity that felt like shards of ice, a piercing focus that made the decorated sergeant major feel like a raw recruit on his first day. The transformation was absolute and terrifying. The harmless cleaning lady had vanished, and in her place sat a predator. Her hand slid across the workbench and pushed a single, heavy object toward Reyes. It wasn't a bullet. It was a challenge coin, thick and made of a dark, non-reflective metal. It made a solid, definitive thud as it came to rest in front of him. The insignia stamped on it was one he had only ever seen in a heavily redacted intelligence file. A shield with a spectral figure in the center. Task Force Aegis. "Some legends are hard to kill, Sergeant Major," Lena said. Her voice was no longer the soft, hesitant whisper he was used to. It was a quiet, controlled rasp, honed by years of command and weighted with an authority that transcended rank. Make sure you aren't standing in the way of one. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact, a command delivered from a level of the hierarchy he couldn't even comprehend. Reyes, a man whose bark could make colonels flinch, felt a primal knot of fear tighten in his gut. He gave a short, sharp nod, his face pale under the sterile lights. The power in the room had just shifted, and the most dangerous person on the entire military installation wasn't the one with stripes on their sleeve. It was the woman in the gray coveralls holding a cleaning rag. Reyes turned and walked out of the armory, his entire understanding of the world fundamentally altered. The next morning, Sergeant Major Reyes was seen speaking urgently into a secure satellite phone, his back pressed against the wall of his office, his voice a low, frantic murmur. An hour later, he was standing in front of the base commander, Colonel Bishop. Bishop was a career officer with political ambitions, a man who saw his command at Fort Jackson as a stepping stone to a desk at the Pentagon. He was more concerned with budgets and appearances than with ghost stories. "It's a civilian contractor, Reyes," Bishop said, waving a dismissive hand. "A cleaning lady. So she knows a few old tricks. Let's not lose our grip on reality." Reyes leaned forward, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the colonel's immaculate mahogany desk. He spoke a few short sentences, his voice too low for the aide sitting just outside the closed door to hear. He mentioned a name, Spectre. He mentioned a unit, Task Force Aegis. And he mentioned a protocol, Sierra Tango 77. Colonel Bishop's confident smirk dissolved as if wiped away by acid. The blood drained from his face, leaving behind a waxy, horrified pallor. He stared at Reyes, his mouth slightly agape, as if the sergeant major had just calmly informed him that a nuclear missile was 5 minutes from impact. The ripple effect was almost immediate. The atmosphere on the base began to change in subtle, unnerving ways. That afternoon, as Lena shuffled past the command building with her mop and bucket, Colonel Bishop, who was walking out, froze mid-stride. He physically flattened himself against the brick wall to let her pass, his eyes wide with something that looked like terror. A young, cocky captain, the same one who had impatiently told Lena to get a move on with the trash cans just days before, now practically sprinted ahead of her to hold open the door to the mess hall, stammering, "After you, ma'am. Please." The recruits were the most confused. They saw the deference, the sudden, inexplicable respect being paid to the cleaning lady, but they couldn't comprehend the reason. They watched in bewilderment as their drill instructors, men who seemed to fear neither God nor man, would instinctively snap to a rigid posture of attention when Lena walked by, only to relax into an awkward, confused slump once she was out of sight. The whispers started immediately. "Who is she?" they asked each other in hushed tones in the barracks. "Is she some kind of secret billionaire? I heard she's a senator's daughter, working undercover." The speculation grew wilder with each passing day. Through it all, Lena remained unchanged. She mopped the floors. She wiped down the tables. She cleaned the weapons. She seemed utterly oblivious to the silent, widening circle of fear and awe that was forming around her. Her placid, unassuming demeanor only amplified the tension. It was like watching a sleeping tiger, knowing that at any moment its eyes could snap open. The mystery of the cleaning lady was no longer a curiosity. It was becoming a legend. The tension finally boiled over in the officers' club. Lieutenant Davenport, a cocky West Point graduate with a jawline as sharp as his ambition, slammed his dinner tray down on the table where Sergeant Major Reyes was sitting alone. The clatter silenced half the room. "I want to know what the hell is going on, Sergeant Major," Davenport demanded, his voice loud and accusatory. "This entire base is walking on eggshells around a janitor. It's absurd. Command is paralyzed. What did you tell the colonel?" Reyes looked up, his eyes weary. He seemed to have aged a decade in the last 48 hours. He gestured for the lieutenant to sit, his expression grim. "Lower your voice, son. You're making a fool of yourself." "I want an explanation," Davenport insisted, though he sat, his anger radiating off him. Reyes let out a long, tired sigh, the sound of a man burdened by a secret too heavy to carry alone. "You see a cleaning lady," he began, his voice a low growl. "Your eyes work, but you don't see a damn thing. That knot on her wrist, that wasn't just some arts and craft project. It was the uniform of a unit that officially never existed. Task Force Aegis." Davenport scoffed. "A ghost story? Is that what this is about?" "They were troubleshooters," Reyes shot back, leaning in. "Sent in alone when an operation went so sideways that the government had to disavow it entirely. They weren't soldiers. They were scalpels. They were sent in to prevent wars, to dismantle entire networks, to do the things no one else could or would. The official story is that the program was a catastrophic failure. The entire unit was declared wiped out during a black op in Eastern Europe in the early 2000s. Buried. Forgotten." Reyes paused, his gaze intense. "But the legend always said one of them got out. The first one. The one who wrote their operational doctrine. The one they called Spectre." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper that was more powerful than a shout. "Her name is Lena. The woman you see mopping floors single-handedly wrote the book on unconventional warfare that your professors at West Point are still trying to decipher. She's not a ghost, Lieutenant. She's a goddamn myth." Davenport stared, his arrogance finally cracking, replaced by a stunned disbelief. He didn't want to believe it. It was impossible, but the seed of a terrifying doubt had been planted. He was about to find out that the myth was very, very real. The proof arrived the next day from a clear blue sky. The distinct, rhythmic thump-thump-thump of a Black Hawk helicopter echoed across the base, a sound that always signified the arrival of someone of profound importance. It didn't land at the designated VIP helipad. It descended directly onto the grassy field next to Rifle Range 7, kicking up a tornado of dust and dry grass. The entire base seemed to hold its collective breath. out stepped a 4-star general, his uniform immaculate, his shoulders heavy with the weight of command. General McKenna, the head of Special Operations Command. He strode across the field with an urgent purpose, completely ignoring the frantic salute of Colonel Bishop, who had run out to meet him. McKenna walked right past the base commander as if he were a statue, his eyes locked on the firing line. He came to a stop directly in front of Lena, who was quietly watching a group of recruits practice. The young soldiers looked on, utterly bewildered. A few of them smirked, one whispering to his friend, "Looks like the cleaning lady is finally getting fired." General McKenna did not yell. He did not reprimand. He stood before the unassuming woman in the gray coveralls and spoke with a tone of the deepest, most profound respect, his voice carrying clearly in the sudden, absolute silence. "Spectre, we received your signal." The smirks on the recruits' faces evaporated, replaced by wide-eyed, slack-jawed disbelief. Lieutenant Davenport, who had been observing the drill, looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. McKenna turned to the assembled soldiers, his voice now booming with authority. "For those of you who are confused, let me be clear. The woman standing before you, the woman you know as Lena, has a service record that is sealed above my own pay grade. She is credited with single-handedly preventing 2 civil wars, dismantling 3 international trafficking syndicates, and rescuing more high-value assets than any single SEAL team in the last 20 years. The woman you have watched sweep these floors designed the very infiltration tactics your instructors are teaching you. And she found them wanting." He turned back to Lena. The power dynamic of the entire base not just shattered, but vaporized. "Your signal," McKenna said, his voice now urgent. "The Sierra Tango 77 protocol. It was a fail-safe, a break glass in case of Armageddon alarm. It hasn't been active in my lifetime. Why now, Spectre? Why are you here?" All eyes were on Lena. The frail, shuffling janitor was gone. She stood up straight, the stoop in her shoulders vanishing as if it had been part of a costume. When she spoke, her voice was clear and steady, a blade honed by years of command. "I'm here because of what happened last Tuesday at the NSA listening post in Utah. The thieves think they stole an intelligence asset, a data file codenamed Cassandra. They're wrong." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "Cassandra isn't a file. She's a person, a cryptographer working on next-generation quantum encryption for the agency." She looked directly at McKenna, her expression hardening. "And she's my sister. She didn't just let them take her. She embedded a message for me inside the breach itself. A list of names." A wave of shock rippled through the crowd. This wasn't about old war stories. This was happening right now. Just as the full implication of her words hit, a sudden, violent movement broke the stunned silence. Lieutenant Davenport drew his sidearm with terrifying speed. But he didn't aim it at Lena. He aimed it directly at General McKenna, grabbing the general's shoulder and pulling him close as a human shield. "She's right, General," Davenport snarled, his face a mask of fanaticism. "The lock is here, and you just lost the key." Simultaneously, a thunderous explosion rocked the base from miles away. A column of black smoke climbed into the sky from the direction of the main ammunition depot. The theoretical threat had just become brutally, physically real. Chaos erupted. But in the heart of the storm, Lena was an island of perfect calm. She snatched the M4 rifle from the hands of the nearest, paralyzed recruit. It was a weapon she had cleaned just the night before. Davenport was using the 4-star general as a shield, peering around his side to fire. It was an impossible shot. The loyal soldiers hesitated. Lena showed no such hesitation. She dropped to one knee, the rifle an extension of her own body. She took a single, measured breath. Slow as smooth, smooth as fast. A single, sharp crack echoed from her M4. But the round didn't fly toward Davenport. It streaked downrange and struck the heavy steel support arm of a target stand at the 200-yard line. The 5.56 millimeters round ricocheted at a precise, calculated angle. It was a 1 in a billion shot, a geometric miracle of violence. The deflected round zipped back across the range and slammed into Davenport's firing hand, shattering the pistol and the bones holding it. He screamed, a raw sound of pain and disbelief, and collapsed. The legend was true. With the firefight over in a matter of seconds, Lena stood up, ignoring the groaning traitor and the babble of shocked soldiers. She strode over to the whimpering Lieutenant Davenport, grabbed a handful of his uniform, and hauled him to his feet, her face cold iron. The explosion at the depot was a diversion, Lena stated, her voice leaving no room for lies. A distraction for the main event. My sister, Cassie. Her transport was routed through this base. You were moving her for final extraction. Where is she? Davenport, his face a mess of terror and pain, looked past Lena, his eyes pointing toward a concrete maintenance hatch set into the ground near the edge of the range. Service tunnel, he gasped. Under the base to the old, decommissioned airfield on the north side. Lena looked at Reyes, her mind already a map of the base, tracing the path. They're moving her right now. We have to cut them off. Leading a small team of the most seasoned soldiers, Lena and Reyes descended into the dark, musty service tunnels. It was a forgotten labyrinth to most, but not to her. She moved through the darkness with an unnerving confidence, using her encyclopedic knowledge of the base's old architecture to outmaneuver the extraction team. In a swift, brutally efficient confrontation in the echoing dark, the remaining traitors were neutralized. Her sister, Cassie, shaken but unharmed, was safe. Back on the surface, under the bright afternoon sun, the base was secure. General McKenna approached Lena, who now stood with an arm around the younger sister she had just rescued. Lena, McKenna began, his voice thick with emotion and gratitude. The country owes you a debt it can never repay. Again, Lena didn't look at the general. She didn't look at the captured traitors being led away, or the grateful soldiers who now stared at her with unadulterated awe. She just looked out toward the horizon, her gaze distant, analytical, already 5 steps ahead. This was just one cell, General, she said quietly, her voice carrying on the breeze. The network that did this is still out there. She patted her sister's arm gently. And the list she gave me is very long. The legend of the quiet cleaning lady was over. But the work of the Spectre had just begun. If you believe that true heroes often walk among us, unseen and unthanked, then subscribe for more stories of valor. Like and share this to honor the quiet professionals who stand guard when no one is watching. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And, as always, please comment with respect.